Welcome to Eastmans Journal Podcast. I'm your host, Ike Eastman. Today's special guest is Sam Soholt. Now, I've known Sam for almost 10 years. He is quite the nomad. He's traveled around, didn't have a home for a long time, has worked through the industry and in a lot of different facets. Very, very interesting, a gifted photographer, videographer, as well as a really out of the box thinker in business. And so we talk about his life, him almost crashing in a helicopter. We talk about, how his TED Talk is really interesting. It's about obstacles. And so you got to check that out, find that inside the podcast. And one of the fun things is he kind of gives us a little prelude on his success and how he's gone from, just literally not having a house or a home or anything, all the way to now him and his wife are traveling around and doing it the lifestyle that he has designed versus the corporate bureaucracy and the stuff that some people, maybe you're struggling with it. I know people around me that are struggling with it. And so live vicariously a little bit through Sam. So Sam Soholt, let's check out what his life was like and why he hunts. This episode of the podcast is brought to you by Silencer Central. Silencer Central, thank you for supporting us. If you would like to support Silencer Central, if you have any interest in a silencer, which I encourage because it is a game changer in the field, check out silencercentral.com. They will walk you through the paperwork online, as well as they can ship that silencer directly to your doorstep. So check them out and tell them Ike sent you. This episode is sponsored by Sawyer Products. Sawyer is a cool company that provides not just great products like water filtration systems, first aid kits, insect repellent, and sunscreen. They also are giving clean drinking water to people around the world. Every time you buy a water filter, be it the small one for your water bottle or the one you hook onto a garden hose, you and Sawyer are helping a developing country with good, clean water systems. Their insect repellent is astonishing. They even have some you spray on your clothes or your pets to keep those creepy, nasty crawlies away. Their sunscreen works so well you only have to apply a few times a day versus every 50 minutes with the other guys. It is truly amazing. So go get some Sawyer products that not only work great, but also give back to the communities around the world. Check them out at Sawyer.com and tell them you heard it at Eastman's. So let's just get into it. Where did you grow up? Did you grow up in Bozeman?
No, I grew up in the beautiful state of South Dakota. So I was,
eastern side, right?
Eastern side, in the real flatland. So I was born in Aberdeen, and then when I was 4, we moved to Sioux Falls. So I grew up in Sioux Falls, so southeast corner down there. Yep.
Okay. And growing up fishing, hunting, I mean, what was child life like for Sam?
Yeah, I mean, our dad was always super into it. He did a lot of upland hunting when we were growing up. Before we were born, he archery hunted a lot, but then kids came along and he was like, I don't have time to spend in the woods archery hunting. So when we got old enough to tromp around, we could do more of a family style hunt with the upland thing. So did a lot of that when we were younger. And then that transitioned into a lot more waterfowl stuff just because, the region that we lived in was such good duck hunting that it was like kind of a no-brainer. And older brother started doing it with some friends, and then we went full bore on it. And we kind of quit upland hunting altogether and just started duck hunting like every chance we got. But yeah, grew up hunting and fishing, and summers when we were super young, we used to go to like Minnesota for a week every year with all the family. We'd rent in northern Minnesota, go to the lake and ski and fish and whatever. And then an old friend from Aberdeen that my parents knew had they had bought 2 lake places on a small lake. And my parents were like, well, rather than doing a week in Minnesota, why don't we rent for the summer? And then our weekends we can spend up here. And then, so we, started doing the weekend warrior thing at the lake, and they eventually bought a place. And so I kind of like, we lived in Sioux Falls, but like I think my formative years happened like near the water in eastern South Dakota, just on the lake doing everything outdoors possible. So it was definitely ingrained from a very, very young age.
So I didn't know you had a brother. I knew you had a sister, and
Yep.
there's some funny stories. We'll get into that too. But um, are you? So there's just three of you.
Yeah, so I'm the middle child. So Josh,
That explains a lot.
yeah, of course it does. Yeah, I mean Josh really like this whole like hunting, being in the hunting industry, all the stuff that we're up to. Like obviously our dad, got us into it all. But Josh was really the one that like paved the way, or at least showed me that there was opportunity to like go do it and like spend life and make a career out of it. Because he like chose college because he wanted to learn how to elk hunt, so he went to University of Wyoming. And then, yeah, and then he opened up an archery shop and backcountry hunting store in Fort Collins, and I worked there for a little bit. So it's just, like he really like he was the guy that was like, oh, I can, you can do this. Like you
Is
can
he?
make stuff.
Is he still? Does he still have that shop?
Nope, they closed it down in 2019. So they ran it for about 10 years. Um, Closed it down, and then him and his business partner who owned the shop together, rather than just letting all of that archery knowledge just like, go to the wayside, they started what's called Bowtune School. So it's bowtuneschool.com. And it's basically an online course that people can buy. And you can go in and it's like top to bottom, left to right, A to Z, everything you need to know about tuning a bow, as
Really?
well as a test you can take to have so you can be like archery tech certified. And so if there's people that like, if they just want to know like what the shops are doing to their bow when they take it in there,
Right.
you get a way better understanding. Or if you're trying to be an archery tech, or if you want to do all your own stuff, like you can take that and do that. So they kind of, leveraged all of the knowledge that they had gained working on, thousands of bows over a decade and put it all into a easy to follow course and did that. And now Josh and I own public land tees together. And then, he does all sorts of stuff. So
That's cool. Is he still
yeah.
in Colorado?
Yeah. Yep. So he's still in Fort Collins area, I guess in LaPorte, but just on the north side of Fort Collins. But yeah, they've been him and his wife and their two kids. They've been here for I think since 2009 or 10. They moved here. So yeah,
So you say here because you're in Colorado as well, right?
I am currently. Yeah, I've just been following my wife around. She decided to start doing travel occupational therapy, and so we have been doing she's been doing a rotation in Loveland, Colorado, and so we've been living in Fort Collins since mid March. But yeah, it's been great. It's been nice to be back in the mountains.
Travel. So it's like a traveling nurse, but it's
OT,
occupational therapy. Okay.
right?
Okay.
Yeah. So she does typically 13-week rotations. So we've kind of bounced around. We did one in Idaho Falls, and then we were down just north of Kansas City. And then we were in Salt Lake last spring, kind of summer, and then we went home for a while. And then we've been in Fort Collins now since mid March. So and then we'll go back home here in a few weeks.
And where's home?
Home currently, or like residency, I guess, is Fargo, North Dakota, of all places.
Oh my gosh. Did you? Is that where she's from?
So she grew up in Moorhead, so just
Okay.
on the east side of the river. And yeah, and then when we got married, she had been looking at doing the travel thing, and ended up the market was way down at that point, like for the number of travelers that they were taking. And so she ended up getting a full-time job at the hospital in Fargo where she had done one of her school rotations.
Okay.
And then so she took a full-time job. So I was like, all right, I guess we're, for now, we're moving back to Fargo, but it's not all bad. It's cheap, like it's so cheap to live there, and
Really?
there's a lot of cool stuff to do like within striking distance. So still get to have a lot of fun.
I know. I know this is cliche, but the audience is going to be thinking about it every time I think of Fargo. I think of the movie,
Oh yeah.
and of course, as you know, my right hand, Brandon, who
Uh-huh.
we've done one of these podcasts with him, but he's from North Dakota, and he just hates that everybody thinks of North Dakota. They think of the movie Fargo. He's like, there's a bunch of us that don't talk like that.
Well, I mean, he can say that, but there's not that many of us in North Dakota that don't talk like that. Like I know as soon as I go back and I'm around it again, like the long O's come out, the boat and oh yeah, like
Oh yeah, don't you know
yeah,
it?
like
You betcha.
my in-laws were just in town for the weekend, and like just listening to, like like it's super thick. Um, and there was one time Josh had come home from, I think he was living in Idaho at the time, but he'd come back home and we were duck hunting in South Dakota together. And it was him and my dad and I. And I was, still in college, and so I'd come down from Fargo, and we were duck hunting or whatever, and we had to pull a boat through this like real thick weeds, like from one pond to another. And I look back and I go, looks like a boat came through there, like making a joke. But not how I said it, but just like, like there's this
Yeah.
big path. And Josh turns to me and goes, "You really Fargoed the shit out of that one." So I am guilty as anybody for, having the northern accent for
So you
sure.
went to NDSU is there, right?
Yep.
In
Yep.
Fargo. So you went to
Yeah.
NDS too. I
Yeah.
didn't know
I
that.
was a bison.
You were the bison. Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, no wonder you and Brandon have nothing in common. He
I
was
know,
UND
right?
guy.
Yeah.
Other than
Yeah.
the Badlands. So did you hunt in the Badlands when you were in college? Is that when you first started that?
It's funny enough, I did not spend any time in the Badlands when I was in college, just because I was so ate up with duck hunting. So I was constantly just, up by Finley and like Nome and like all sorts of places around that had lots of water and lots of ducks. And it wasn't until I was a senior in college that I started archery hunting and kind of
Okay.
got more into it. So the first time I actually hunted the Badlands, I think I had left Fargo. I had been gone for 4 or 5 years and went back and finally spent some time out there. Yeah.
For those that don't know, the Badlands is in western North Dakota, and it is very breaky. Lots of breaks, and it's really good mule deer hunting. In fact, there's some records that came from North Dakota from that area that they're huge deer. Brian Barney, the podcast host of Eastman's Elevated, shot a really nice deer there a couple years
Yeah.
ago. So
Yeah.
it's unknown and it's hard to draw a tag,
Yeah,
but
and that's why it's so good,
yeah.
it's incredible country. With the secondary oil boom, there's a
Mhm.
lot more access, and so I think that really cut down on a lot of the, quality of animals out there, but
Yeah.
at the same time, like, it's hard to describe to people who haven't seen it, like, breaksea country is a good way to put it, but, like, there's so many folds in
Yeah.
that ground, it's, like, even more extreme than, like, the Missouri breaks in
Right.
Montana.
Right.
Um, like there could be deer anywhere. And I've got friends that live out in Western North Dakota and they don't really post much, but I get texts every year and like, it's like a buddy of mine, his name's Sam as well, but I get a text every year. It's like him and his four buddies, they all shoot deer that are, 190 plus, but like you
Jeez.
just never see them
Right.
because, those guys are out there every day looking for them. It's just what they do. It's what they live for.
Yep. I was
Yeah.
shocked when Brandon would show me photos, and it's funny, they're not alone. I really didn't know that the breaks existed and had such quality deer until Brandon started working here, and he'd show photos of his buddies and stuff that they've been shooting on, some of it private access just because there's a lot of private property there, but also public. I was just blown away. I was like, holy crap, that's a huge secret. And then he told me how hard it is to draw.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, so
Yeah.
non-resident, you're never drawing that. No.
Yeah,
So
and I think that's the cool thing about it. Like, so non-resident's hard to draw, especially with a rifle. You can get an archery tag every few years, maybe.
mhm.
But as a resident, even though you can get the archery tag, it's really hard to draw a rifle mule deer tag. And so, it's like 6, 7, 8 years to draw some of the good units. And that's what I mean. North Dakota has a lot of strange rules, whatever. But one thing they do is
Yes.
protect the resource in a big way.
Yes. That's right. That's
Yeah.
right. So, growing up in South Dakota, let's talk duck hunting. I mean, you're still doing a ton of it, right? That's kind of what got you in what you're doing now is the duck side of your world, isn't it?
Yeah, I kind of like rolled back into it. So grew up doing it all the time, and then like basically chose college based on it, and so that because I had reciprocity for tags or not tags, but for duck hunting in North Dakota, so I could hunt North and South Dakota as a resident
I
all
didn't
through
know that.
college. Yeah, so you can't get deer tags as a student, but all the small game stuff is all like you pay resident fees.
Oh,
Yeah, so it's sweet. So I could, I'd hunt my parents, I graduated with good grades, so it works out now. But I would duck hunt with buddies like, Tuesday, Thursday, and then I'd go down to South Dakota and hunt with my dad Saturday, Sunday, so I was hunting all the time. But what drug me into the industry was like the big game side of things. So Josh had, he's like, you got to get a bow. You got to get a bow. He was elk hunting and doing all that stuff. And I went out to Wyoming and tried to film, like I didn't know what I was doing, but tried to film an elk hunt of him and his buddy. And I basically drove back from that trip, went straight to Shields and bought a bow. And I was like, okay, I'm in. And then that first year that I started archery hunting, I ended up shooting two whitetail bucks within 10 days of each other. So I
Wow.
shot one little tiny 2x3 in South Dakota, and then I shot a real nice one in North Dakota. Yeah, just a week or 8 days later, or whatever. And it was a nice 5x5. Not giant, but like for me, like
Yeah.
huge.
First animals. That's awesome.
Exactly. Yeah. So, just knocked those 2 down within 10 days, and then I was so fired up, that I just started cold calling and cold emailing any contact in the hunting industry I could find. I wouldn't be surprised if somewhere way back in the archives, you guys have an email from sam.soholt@ndsu.edu. Because
Probably.
I like blasted everyone. Resume, I was going to school to get my master's in business and the whole thing. And I just, tried anyone I could. And Bill Winky happened to email me back and was like, "Hey, we're always looking for interns." And so I went down and met with him over Christmas break, my senior year, and got an internship with Midwest Whitetail. And so I finished grad school online while I was down chasing Iowa whitetails and producing
Nice.
hunting shows and wrangling pro staff. And yeah, so that's what really kind of like the duck thing got, kept me in it, and do a lot of, fundraising and duck hunting and stuff now. But yeah, it was the big game side that pushed me into it for sure.
So you got into so when we met, you and I met, you were working for Yeti. You were
Hmm.
running their it was the first or second year that they really had retail or go doing retail store shows or
Yep.
retail shows. Um how did you transition from Winky into Yeti? That seems odd.
Seems weird. Yeah.
Yeah. You're like,
um,
"Oh, I'm gonna go on the road for 2 years." Whoa.
Yeah, so there's a few things that happened, and kind of the one of the ways that I've worked my career is just always figuring that each job was going to be the network that led to the next job. It's young and hungry and trying to figure it out, and I just figured the more people I knew within the space, the better. So did the internship with Winky, moved to Colorado. Josh had the shop at that point, so I worked in his store and met a guy who was a sales rep, and he owned the rep agency, and they were looking for a new sales rep in Montana, Idaho, and Wyoming. And so I took the sales rep job, moved to Bozeman, and was doing that I did that for about 8 months. But during it, like I was working on all commission. So I had no salary, no nothing. So I'm just up there in Montana
Awesome.
burning money on the road, trying to make it work. Um, and I wasn't bad at sales. That's that like I did sell a lot, but the length of time, I think what people don't understand is if you sell into a store, then you're probably looking at, somewhere between 30 and 60 days of delivery of goods. And then you're looking at somewhere between 30 and 60 days of payment. And then you're looking at somewhere between 30 and 60 days of commission payment.
Yeah.
And so I was working on building that pipeline, but it was just slow. And I was just, I was losing money and it just wasn't going well. So one day, randomly, I was sitting at a coffee shop inside of Safeway in Bozeman. I just would walk from home and go work there every day because I, needed to get out of the house or whatever.
Right.
And the guy next to me was on the phone with somebody talking about a video project that he was working on. And he got off the phone and I didn't know anybody in Bozeman. So I just struck up a conversation. And I was like, "Hey, what are you working on?" And there's a guy named Ian Majak, who lives in Alaska now, but he used to do a lot of video work across the industry and different companies, or whatever. But he was like, "I'm doing a project for Museum of the Rockies, but my main gig is um, at the time he was the main producer for Steve West at Steve's Outdoor Adventures."
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and so I was like, "Oh," so we exchanged information because I was trying to sell a camera at the time, and I was just, "If you know anybody, give him my number or whatever." And um, I ended up selling the camera, so I texted Ian. I was like, "Hey, thanks for the tip. I sold the camera through the film school at MSU." And he's like, "Hey, do you know how to run a Sony EX1?" And I was like, "Well, yeah, won a bunch down at Midwest Whitetail." And he's like, I need a second shooter on a bear hunt in Alaska, and are you available?" Like it was June something. I was like, yeah, I'll take anything at this point. I need a little
I'm
bit of money
starving to death.
yeah, right. So, went on a whatever 10-day grizz hunt in Alaska. We didn't end up killing a grizz, but had a great time up there, and filmed everything and did the job. And but that ended up leading to a connection to another shooter who they were looking for another guy to film Coast Guard Alaska, which was on Kodiak Island. And so got in touch with the producer at Coast Guard Alaska, ended up getting hired, quit my sales rep job. I was actually at ICAST in Vegas, and I had been talking to the producer, didn't know if I had a job or not. So I flew to ICAST on a Thursday. I got offered the job on Friday. I had a meeting with my whole sales rep group that night, and I was like, I accepted a position to go film on Kodiak for the next 5 months.
Oh my God.
And I had to have a private meeting with my, the boss of the company, and he's like, man, I totally get it. You got to go, chase your dreams. And so he's like, do you need to fly home early? And I was like, honestly, I might have to. So flew there Thursday, told them Friday, flew home Saturday, flew to Kodiak on Monday.
Oh my gosh.
Yep.
Talk about time to prep, right?
Yeah. So got back, threw all my crap in a bag, went to Kodiak. And here I'm 25, terrified, never been in a helicopter, never, not have no idea what I'm doing. Go through the training, get prepped, ended up getting sent out. Like, our whole job was to basically sit and wait for search and rescues. And luckily, I ended up going on probably 8 or 10 search and rescue missions, but every time that when my number got called and the pager would go off and I was up to bat, you race to base, you throw the dry suit on, you get in the helicopter, you have the camera rolling, you're doing the whole thing. Every time that the pager went off for me, either the search and rescue got called off, or somebody else rescued the boat, or something like, something happened. So I luckily I never had to go pull dead bodies out of a
Really?
sinking ship. I never had to do any of that. I just got to fly around in a bunch of terrible weather and get to meet a bunch of cool people. And
Just got a bunch of bumpy rides.
I got a bunch of bumpy rides. One of them was so bumpy, like like you hit a big wind spout coming off the ocean and the helicopter drops, I don't know, 60, 100 feet or whatever.
Oh.
Hey, like, I'm looking around, everyone's calm as can be. The rescue swimmers back there eating gushers, no problem. We kind of come back up. We hit another spot of wind, drop another 60, 100 feet. I'm like, okay, everybody's calm. I guess it's all good. I'm freaking out inside.
When in Rome.
Right. And we land to refuel before we fly back to Kodiak City. And the rescue swimmer was like, oh, I thought we were dead for sure.
He's just used to it.
Yeah. And I was like, what are you talking about? And he's like, well, not much you can do. Like, at least I'm just going to sit there and enjoy it, I guess.
I'm going to go out with a gusher in my mouth, damn it.
Yeah. Yeah. So I did Coast Guard Alaska. And I was supposed to be done with the show towards the end of October. And somebody randomly knocked on the door at the lodge that we were all staying at, because they knew that a film crew was there. And it was the casting director for a different pilot for the History Channel, which was all about brown bear hunting. That was a show that ended up being called The Hunt. And I talked to the producer there, and I was like, hey, like, I'm done with Coast Guard Alaska, in like a couple weeks. If you guys have a shooter that, needs to be replaced, or if there's someone that bails out, or if you need to fill a slot, like, my whole thing is filming hunts like that,
Right.
And so sure enough, I got hired by the History Channel. So I filmed brown bear hunting for 30 days to finish out my stint on Kodiak Island. And then, going back to the kind of each job leads to the next, the final hunt that I filmed for that show, the owner of Timney Triggers was the hunter, and his best buddy, which is a really good friend of mine now, Chris Ellis, came along with him. And at the time, he was the PR guy for Remington Firearms. And I had been just, I was filming obviously for the show, but I was shooting a bunch of photos on the side. And I was like, well, if you guys want these photos, like, I'll just email you the link or whatever. And Chris ended up hiring me for my first ever professional photo shoot. And that's what kind of spiraled me into more of the photography side of things. Cause all the new product seminars for Remington. Like I just met every editor, every writer, and just started to get hired more and more within kind of that space. And I was actually at a SHOT Show for one of the other clients or whatever, one of the other magazines, and I had met somebody there, and she ended up happening to be friends with the people that were hiring for the Yeti Roadshow. So through through all of that, like meandering, kind of around the world, just one more connection through one more connection through one more connection, ended up my name got thrown into a hat and got called, and I ended up being 18 months on the road talking about coolers. So if anybody
It
if
was,
anybody needs to know anything about a cooler, I got you
yeah.
covered. Yeah.
Yeah, and that was early on when people didn't really understand what Yeti was. It was you started about the time that they started taking off as a brand.
Yeah.
And it's funny, I remember the sales force that sold Yetis up here. They walk into my office because the guy comes by here all the time. He's like, I go, what new lines you got? And I remember him going, I got this cooler company, $700 coolers. And we all went, who's gonna buy a $700 cooler? Well, here we go. Here
Yeah.
we are.
Turns out everybody. And then,
Exactly.
and then everybody that bought one bought another one and
And
another
then
one and
and
another
then
one.
and then now they all have a cabinet full of Yeti, Yeti
Yep.
drinkware.
Yeti drinkware.
That's it.
Yep. Yep. It was
So
hilarious that, yeah, you're right. Like so the drinkware had just hit the market when I was doing the road show. And so the people would show up at these shows and they would like beeline it for the booth, because the back of the booth we had put up like a whole display of the stainless steel drinkware. And
do you
that's all
know
they had.
this is where this cup right here I got from you then? Because the
Oh,
only
sweet.
one you had was the big ones left.
Yep, the 30s.
Yep. I was like, God,
That's
that's a lot of tea. Well, guess what? I drink out of it all the time now.
Oh, that's awesome. But man, people would just like, it was like bugs to a bug zapper. Like it was hilarious watching people, like they'd spot the Yeti sign from across the show floor and just like come right in. And we ended up having a lot of fun with people because of it. Like
Yeah.
they were so engrossed in the product that you could do all sorts of stuff around. Like the hopper had just come out, and so we started doing what we called the hopper toss. And so we had the hopper 30 on one side of the booth and we had the hopper 40 on the other side of the booth. And so we'd be talking to them about one size, and you just like get the other guy's attention like in the booth while you're
Yeah.
talking. And you'd be like, so this is the hopper 30, and then you would just put your hands up and be like, and this is the hopper 40, and they would just throw it into your hands and turn. But people were so focused that they didn't even recognize that a cooler had just flown across the booth and just landed in your hands. And just, yeah, it was hilarious.
I remember that it was like the last day of the show or whatever, and that show that was in Portland, and it's 5 days, and it was it's a grind, it's long hours and all that stuff. And I just remember you coming over Sunday and going, I'm pretty sure I'm running a frat house.
Yeah, it wasn't far off. I mean, the place we were staying was literally above a bar.
Yeah.
And so, we had been out there for like 10 days because we'd done all the training, getting the booth ready, doing all the stuff, and then like right into that first Portland show. And man, like the crew was so fun, but like, I was the field crew manager. And so I'm like, trying to go to bed at a decent time most nights. But by the end of that trip,
Yeah.
it was definitely a frat house.
In the crew and Yeti did it right. Well, they just went around to a bunch of like fishing guides and guys that were off for the season. And like, hey, you want to do this in your off season? Oh, sure, I'll do that. I'll go around to a couple shows. And it was entertainment to say the least.
Oh yeah.
It was a lot of fun.
We had a lot of fun. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's talk about, you transitioned out of Yeti and kind of you started your own gig, and you're calling it content production. But what does that mean for the layman? What do you do? How do you pay the bills every day?
Yeah. So, early on, like even post like Yeti career, I was still doing mostly like following other people around. I went and filmed Brandon on a hunt. I went, and I did a lot of stuff with Jason Matzinger, and basically anytime that there was, somebody that needed a camera guy, I tried to have my name in the hat for whatever and wherever. So I did that for, a good chunk of time. And then I realized that I was missing out a lot of, my own hunting because of it, which is, that paid the bills. But I also wanted to have the experiences, that I
Right.
wanted to have. And so I kind of started to transition it. Um, I tried to grow like kind of my presence as a photographer in the space, and start to talk more directly to brands and start to work with them on like, hey, if there any other, if there's ever any, product stuff or you need, different hunt content or whatever, just like
Mhm.
start to work that angle. So I get to ride this really fun line now between brand ambassador, for different brands. So that's like basically being a billboard for the brand and then trying to do my best to live the lifestyle that they want their customer base to aspire to. So it's,
Mhm.
like it's trying to spend as many days in the woods as I possibly can a year and just tell that story, and kind of keep people updated on how things are going and what I'm up to and what I'm doing and different ideas. And then on the content side, what that means is I just have a specific set of deliverables. So whether it be short form content, now is king, so reels or,
Right.
TikTok content or vertical stuff, as well as photos. If brands have a hard time launching new products now just because the market is so saturated with so much information that they need to rely on people like me and other people in the industry. So you can, like, oh, there's a new pair of pants or there's new binos or there's new whatever that's hitting the market. And what used to be like an email blast or a TV commercial, like no one would ever see that anymore, just because there's so much of it. So they utilize people like me and other people like people that do the type of thing that I do to create content surrounding those new products. And so people can go, oh, there's actually a new, updated, better version of whatever,
XYZ.
XYZ. And I go shoot a bunch of photos and content surrounding that, using it in the field and testing it and breaking it most of the time, and giving feedback. And yeah, so I do that for a bunch of different brands within the space.
Yes, that's a really interesting way. A lot of people are like, "Oh, I'm an influencer." Okay, what does an influencer really mean? And what you're doing is the right way to do it because you're using the products. It's not just, it's not just in my opinion, this is all my opinion, but it's not just, random people using stuff. It's, you use it and you know how to use it and you're using it and breaking it, giving feedback and making a better version of it. That's
Mhm.
really what influencer or they used to call them pro staff. Now they call
Right.
them influencers or content providers. I don't know. We changed the name of 27 times in my career here, but
Yeah.
it's all the same deal.
It's all the same
Um,
thing, just new names.
yep. So then there's the public land tees, which you guys
Hmm.
own, and the bus, of course.
Yep. Yep.
I assume you and your wife don't live in the bus when you're at home now.
We don't. No.
Did you
No.
sell it?
No, I still have it. It probably needs to go away at some point. I just haven't figured out how I want to do that yet. But yeah, it probably needs to go away.
It's the
Yeah.
public land bus.
Yeah, I know. It's hard to get rid of, but it just kind of sits there most often now. I don't use it nearly as much as I used to.
Yeah.
But yeah, the bus was kind of a fun transition. Like that was kind of the big transition from, doing solely like photography for other people and kind of going in and doing like my first own big thing.
Yeah.
And that was that was a fun project for sure. So for anybody who's listening, this is getting to be a while ago now. So I bought the bus at the very end of 2016. And then in all of the summer of 2017, I renovated it into a rolling hunting shack, basically.
Yep.
And then, yeah, I more or less lived out of it for about 2.5 years, and used the bus as a giant billboard to raise awareness about public land issues, as well as launched Public Land Tees with Josh, and as a way to raise money for all the organizations that were doing whatever they could to help protect public land, and make sure it stayed in the right hands and accessible to the actual public and not be sold off to the highest bidder.
Right.
Yeah, so that, since then, the kind of the niche after transitioning into the bus has been, a lot of conservation work and trying to educate people on how to get involved and then just raising as much money as we possibly can.
Yeah, that's awesome. I appreciate you guys doing that. Public land is a really important thing, and it's unique to the U.S. People don't, U.S. kids always think, oh, we're just like everywhere else. No, not really.
Yeah,
The
not
U.S. the
quite.
way we treat our public land. is unique in the world. Canada's a close second, but it's unique, and it's very important as hunters that we have that, because most of the wildlife currently lives on public land. So
Right.
very,
Yeah.
very important.
Yep.
So there's a couple other things I want to talk about. One of them is, did you ever produce the book?
No, I never did, which is a huge mistake on my part.
100%. 100%. You got to explain the book and how did you get the idea?
Okay. All right. So when I was like full-time photographer, I was spending anywhere from 80 to 120 days in a tent of some form or another. So whether it be a wall tent or a teepee or my own little single man tent or whatever, I was sleeping on the ground outside in the backcountry a lot for several years.
No indoor plumbing is the point.
No indoor plumbing. And I had, we all have our quirks, right? Um, and so on these huge backcountry excursions, um, and mind you, like when I did a stone sheep hunt, like was one of like my first hunts that I filmed, like for the, when after I moved west, and I was like, I didn't know what I was doing. Like I knew some, um, but at this point, I still didn't. I wasn't, you get comfortable using the woods as your bathroom over time, but at the beginning, like you try to make it more comfortable, right? So I would find, like honestly, I would find like the most beautiful little like point on a ridge overlooking some like giant valley in northern British Columbia or whatever, and I would build a little rock toilet. And and then I would, like, while we were camped there, like that was my spot. I'd go out and use my, man-made rock toilet. I'd get to like have these peaceful moments out there, kind of away from the rest of camp. Like, you just get to like take it all in. And so I was going to create a coffee table book called Pooping in Beautiful Places. And it was going to be the stories from a backcountry photographer. And I just, it was one of those things that seemed funny in the moment. And I just never
You
ended
have
up.
hundreds of photos like
So many
that, don't you?
photos. Oh yeah.
And it's just your knees. You can just see your
Yeah.
knees.
Yeah. Yeah. So
I wish you would have produced it, because it would
I
be on
should
my
have.
coffee table. I mean,
I
that
know.
is a
There's still
story.
time. I mean, I've got a lot more years in this. I can.
That's right. Yeah, it's the content's built, right? You just have
Right.
to put it
Yeah.
together and produce it. Yeah,
Exactly.
that's true. That's
Yeah.
true.
But I
And
thought it would
then,
be fun to do like a photo essay, kind of
yeah,
thing.
yeah.
Yeah.
So then another thing I want to talk about, because when we first met, you were just leaving, or you were about to leave for a trip to Peru, I believe, with your sister, right?
Oh, Patagonia.
Patagonia. Okay.
Yep.
So
Yep.
you and your sister did a lot of these over the years. Do you guys still travel around like that?
So kind of after that trip, she ended up going to, or she was in med school, but she ended up going to residency like right after that. So, and then so after that trip, we didn't end up really doing like anything big together, as far as travel goes. Cause, now she's married with 2 kids and was in residency, and I'm married, and like, it just, at a time, like when you're not, footloose and fancy free, as they say, like the time
Yep.
just slips away. So, but yeah, we did, so Molly is my sister. It was pretty cool. She had, she was finished with like all of her, med school like classes and all of the like clinicals and the rotations and stuff. And she just had a month in between the last day of that and then graduation. And so we just planned, like we did a full month in Chile and Argentina, and went down and like filled that whole month that she had the gap with travel, and flew to the furthest, flew into Punta Arenas first, and then flew even further south to the furthest southern city in the world, and then kind of worked our way back north through both countries, and hiked Torres del Paine and El Chalten, and went to Argentina, and caught a 28-inch brown trout, and like just did a full month of like the full. I ended up on the stage at a circus in Argentina at one night. There's just things that happen when you travel around and say yes to everything.
Say yes to everything. That is true. That is 100% true. That sounds like a good idea. What time?
Yeah.
Or
Yeah, I'll
maybe
be
that
there.
sounds like a
Yeah,
bad
it's like
idea. What
10
time?
pesos. Yeah, I'm in.
Oh, that's awesome. So married, no kids yet.
No, not yet.
Is it in the works?
It's in the works.
Good.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Because I think you'd make an awesome dad. Probably scary, awesome dad.
I will do my best whenever that comes to pass. But yeah, I'm looking forward to it. And it's kind of funny looking back, like when I dove into all of this hunting, fishing, outdoor career. Um, I grew up with parents who were very career oriented because of us. Like they work really hard to provide for us.
Hmm.
But I also got to see the bad side of that corporate life, right? And like the listening to the hours and hours of conversations about the pains of bureaucracy within, corporate life.
Yes.
And so you grow up like not wanting to be part of that really, or like have to answer to somebody who doesn't have the same ideals as your ideas as you, or, like the same values. Um, and so a lot of that led to this crazy life. And I was like, even from when I was like early 20s, I was like, man, I can go into a career in this and do, even if it's 10 years and then I have to go do something else, at least I got to do 10 years when I was young, healthy. I could do all of it
Yeah.
to any extreme that I wanted. Because then when I retire, I don't have to do any of that
Right.
if I
Yeah.
don't
It's
want to. So
it's they always say you either pay for it up front or you pay for it at the end. One of the ways you're going to pay
you're
for it.
paying for it. Yeah, for
Yeah,
sure.
one of the ways.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Um, as you know, well, first off, let's check and see if we have a sponsor for this episode. Look. This episode is sponsored by Secure, the gun storage system. Have you ever wondered the best way to store your guns, ammo, and actually all your valuables? There is a fine line between safety and accessibility. There's also something to be said about being able to customize your safe for your needs. If you're storing long guns, handguns, ammo, or just need a wall to hang your equipment on, Secure has your back. They have cabinets, rooms, and everything in between. Secure safes are simple, strong, straightforward, and, by the way, they don't keep your combination codes. Secure. This episode of the podcast is brought to you by Eberly Stock. Eberly Stock is one of my favorite backpacks. Now, I've been wearing their backpack for almost 20 years. They have lightweight backpacks, they have modular backpacks, everything from their mainframe, which is just a frame pack that you can put bags on. They have these cool outside called bat wings that you can use. So check them out at eberlystock.com and make sure you tell them Ike sent you. Okay, so as you know, I always ask 3 questions, and it's really about to get people to think about their own life, really.
Mhm.
And so the first question I'm going to ask you is why do you hunt? You grew up hunting, but why do you hunt now, and has it changed over time?
Yeah, it's definitely changed over time. But the reason that I hunt um, is because well, I feel like I have to. I think it's just built into me now. Like after so many years of doing it so much, like I don't know who I would be without like the experiences that I get to have on hunting. When I'm hunting, and it's honestly like it's hardly about killing anything anymore,
Right.
but it is so much about the time and the experience and the different things that happen every time you're out there. Like you have no idea what you're going to run into. Um, but it's also the puzzle, like the never-ending puzzle, which is I think probably more of an addiction for me than it should be. But like I love like trying to pick apart past hunts and future hunts that I'm going on and trying to fit those together and try to use the information that I know to like be more successful in the future. And then, if that like I go do that and then I tear all that apart and I try to put those puzzle pieces together and figure it out again. And that all those little details that you get to come home with and mull around with for another year, in your head, like that's just to me, I just love every second of that.
Yeah, that is a huge part of why a lot of guys hunt, I think, is the puzzle. It's never the same, ever. It's
Hmm.
never the same experience. There's always something you can learn. And it's it's not like you ever reach the top.
Right.
It's one of the reasons why people play golf is because it's never the same. And
Right.
days change and everything. And is hunting's the same way for me.
Yeah. And
Changes every time.
and of course there's all of the other benefits. Like, it's healthy, it's a good meat, the whole thing. But yeah, the puzzle that is constantly in motion is awesome.
Yeah. So, God willing that you have the ability to have a deathbed and you don't get hit by or crash in a helicopter.
Yep.
What is Sam Soholt going to be thinking about?
I'm hoping that I'll be thinking about how I lived my life for the story and not really for anything else. Like, whatever is the better story at the end of my life, that's how I want to live it. I want to do the things that create the most memories and fill the tank with the most experiences possible, without getting in too much of a routine is good, but you have to have the ability to be spontaneous and create memories that you're going to think about when you're laying there. But yeah, hopefully just thinking about all of the memories and being surrounded by people who I love and who love me.
Be thinking about a stage in Argentina.
Yeah. You remember
Cirque.
that? Remember that one time when I was up there on stage with the little person and he gave me his sunglasses? Yeah,
That was weird.
that was weird.
All right, so that leads me to the last question. A TED Talk, which I'm sure you know what a TED Talk is.
Mhm.
So, for the audience that don't know, a TED Talk's something that you're really passionate about, and it's under 18 minutes, and it's either convincing or it's sales pitchy or it's just you're passionate about it. And it could be anything. It doesn't even have to be that you're good at it. It could be just something you're interested in. What would Sam Soholt do his TED Talk on?
When Scott asked me about this, when you said you were going to ask me this question, I actually started thinking about it the other day. And I think the TED Talk I would want to give would be about seeing opportunities more than you see closed doors. And
Ah,
and what I like my whole life, and maybe it's just how I'm wired, but I watched a lot of people around me, they'll hit an obstacle and they see that as the dead end. And I tend to see all that stuff as an opportunity to like move in a different direction or pivot or whatever it might be. So I think it would be a TED Talk on explaining how to better see opportunity around you and not like miss out on that kind of stuff.
so how do you recognize it? Have you thought about this enough to go, I think, here's a couple key factors or a couple things you need to remember or a couple things to think about when you hit an obstacle to look at it as a different way?
Yeah, I think one of the main things that I love my wife to death, but she's very type A. And so I think you have to rewire your brain a little bit. And I was trying to figure out an analogy. Like, let's say you go to a big hardware store, like a Lowe's or a Home Depot. So there's an indoor and there's an outdoor. But regardless of which one you walk up to, both doors open. But I'd say 90% of the population won't go in the outdoor, even though the automatic
Even though it
open.
opens.
Yeah, they'll walk all the way to the indoor. And my wife is like, kind of like yelled at me a couple times, like, "Hey, you're not supposed to go in the door." I was like, it opened, right? And so, and so, I feel like you need to rewire your brain and say, well, it says out, but it opened. Like, this is an opportunity. Like, I'm just going to take this opportunity and go in here.
It's quicker.
Um, yeah, it's quicker. This is more efficient. And I'm like, my brain definitely works with efficiencies. And I think when I run into obstacles, it's like, okay, I hit that. Well, that was not the most efficient way to do that. Like, I'm just going to turn and go around and figure this out. And that didn't work. And then go back and just keep kind of moving in the general direction of your goal and understand that it's never going to be a straight line. And you need to like not get such tunnel vision and be open to other ideas and other openings that might happen and other connections and other networking opportunities, because you have no idea where that little where that ticket is that you need to grab that's going to take you to on the next ride.
Because that's pretty much been your story, your life story is just opportunities, recognizing an opportunity and not pitching it, but putting your name in the hat. Hey, if you
Yeah,
guys are ever looking for somebody to do this, or hey, I've filmed hunts before, rather than sitting there going, gosh, I hope he asks me.
right, exactly, because most of the time nobody has any idea about you.
Yeah, we're all selfish. I've come to the conclusion humans are so selfish. We like to see people fail as long as it's not us.
Right.
So
Exactly.
yeah,
Yeah.
no one's going to be asking because they're
No.
all worried about what they're doing. So
Yeah. You got to be the advocate for yourself and just go after it.
yes,
Yeah.
that's awesome. Well, I appreciate your time. For the audience, you got to check out Sam's Instagram. I don't know if I follow you on Facebook, but I definitely do on Instagram, and I always see all your cool photos and where you've been, what you're doing, public land tea stuff. And I know you've been working with a lot of cool brands, some that we share, like
Hmm.
Savage. We share
Yep.
that brand. You've
Yep.
been doing some really cool stuff with them. And if nothing else, it's there's not a lot of guys that their Instagram is scrollable. Like you go to your profile. I go to your profile a lot when I see
Well, I
you pop
appreciate
up
that.
and scroll through them because there's cool photos and unique ways to see the world out of
Yeah.
Sam Soholt's size. And I appreciate that. I appreciate your friendship and what you're doing. So thank you very much. It is Sam underscore Holt, right? Soholt.
It's just at Sam Soholt, or at Public Land Tees. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Very cool.
Keep it
And
simple.
yeah, there you go. And are you doing YouTube stuff yet?
Yeah, Josh and I have a YouTube channel called Soholt Brothers. And we don't post on there as much as we should, but we do have some good hunts on there. So yeah, we've
Very
been
cool.
trying to update that a little bit.
Very cool. Yeah, it's the world we live in, right?
That's right. Yeah.
It's where I'm consuming all my content. I'm going, when did this happen? So it
Uh-huh.
was like almost overnight.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
It's got even from the time you and I met, the amount that it has all changed is unbelievable.
it
So
is
yeah.
100%. And that
Yeah.
wasn't that long ago. Of course, I like to say that, but it was damn near 10 years ago. So
Almost. Yeah.
well, crazy. Well, I appreciate you coming on, Sam, and stay in touch. We'll keep talking. Hopefully, we'll see each other. Are you doing anything this summer? Any of the shows this summer? Like any of the archery
Yeah,
tack or any of that?
I'll be at Big Sky Tack
Okay,
in a couple
perfect.
weeks. Yep. And
I'll be
then
there. We'll
sweet.
catch up, have a beer.
Yeah. All right.
I'm
Awesome.